Good morning, everyone. All right, first question. I read that Amazon is flagging weighted blankets due to FDA concerns. Since I sell a similar related item and have used weighted blankets in my back-end search terms due to Amazon even suggesting that to me, should I remove weighted blankets so I don't get flagged? Potentially. So the challenge with something like weighted blankets is that typically they're used for certain kinds of therapies. So the most common is for kids with autism, and it just makes them feel better to be more enclosed. So it's something that's helping anxiety and sensory processing disorders, different sorts of things like that. So the biggest problem with weighted blankets is that there's certain weights of blankets that have been shown to be more effective than others. And when you make claims like that it helps with certain kinds of sensory disorders or processing disorders, or anything on the autism spectrum, you're making medical claims. That's why the FDA is concerned about it. So just because you have a blanket with weights doesn't mean that it's designed in such a way that it actually has some efficacy for the person that it's being used for. So you're supposed to be testing these things so that you can make those claims. If you haven't tested it, if you haven't done any sort of validation of those claims, like through a university or, I think this would be difficult to test with a laboratory. I think you'd have to do some sort of focus group with family members who can use it with their family members who have these challenges. Then you're going to have a hard time responding to any sort of claim review that Amazon makes. Now, as far as the defense that Amazon told you to use these keywords, keep in mind that every team at Amazon is different. And quite frankly, compliance is always playing catch up. I was in compliance, and I know we always had something happen where some team would come up with some great new thing, and they're like, look at this, it's amazing. Look at what we just did. And you go look, and you're like, but you are opening us up to so much liability. Why would you do that? And of course, they're trying to sell stuff, and we were trying to protect Amazon. So Amazon and Amazon's customers. So we would go back and we'd go fix whatever they did. And so compliance is always kind of cleaning up after what everyone else does. And they don't have any control over things like keyword suggestions or anything like that. There were multiple times where there would be a recommendation when I was working in recalls for a seller to start selling a recalled item again. And it's like, it's recalled. It shouldn't be told. But that means that the people who wrote the recommendation widget would have had to call our service API to figure out which ASINs they shouldn't be recommending, and they never did that, right? So it's all software, it's all set up, and the people who created the recommendations widget didn't call our software to find out if they should or shouldn't be suggesting it. And so then sellers are like, you guys are idiots. You're recommending I sell something that's non-compliant, not even legal to sell. So with something like this, don't take it personally that Amazon recommended you do something that could get you shut down. That happens on a regular basis. But I would take it out and any claims about whatever product that you're doing. If you're making any sort of claims that it helps with sensory processing disorder or anything like that, take them off of Amazon. If you really want people to find your product and be able to buy it because of that stuff, what you want to do is you want to start a blog. You want to go and do WordPress.com, start an easy blog. There's templates that are super easy to pop up. WordPress.com is even easier to use to set up a blog than going to Shopify is to set up a product website. Like, it's great. We use WordPress.org, but that's because we use WordPress as our backend website management tool. WordPress.com is the one where you can put together a really easy, simple blog. Then what you do is you make a niche blog about you retweet, not retweet, you repackage other people's blogs. You say like the top 10 blogs on blah, 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 or the top 6 reasons why a weighted blanket is great, or whatever your blanket happens to be. Then you link your product in the blog so you get traffic that way. And then you make all your claims off of Amazon, not on Amazon. Okay, because that'll get you shut down. Okay, question from Lee. With a new product launch, do you have a recommended PPC strategy? Should we do automated ads with some product ads that target other products? What do you recommend? So I actually do have this in the advertising challenge, and we'll actually be redoing the advertising challenge soon. There's been so many new things that Amazon has done since our advertising challenge 6 months ago that we actually need to do a new one to update that data and to give people more information. So yes, I do recommend having an automated ad as well as targeting 5 competitors. Between 4 and 5 is usually what we do. And we basically will do the recommended bid with the 4 to 5 competitors that are targeted. And that's for keyword ranking. So you have an automated ad that does wherever it goes. Then you have your competitor ads that target specific keyword results. So that means using Helium 10 or Scope or something like that to do a reverse ASIN lookup and then targeting all of the keywords that particular product ranks for, and do 4 to 5 of those. And then the last one is to set up a couple of product and category target ads. And so I typically will use Amazon's recommendations, and then sometimes we'll add to those the ASINs that show up in my automated ad, and then target those ones specifically, because if they convert, then they're worth doing. Now, I usually keep my Amazon recommended campaign and my proven ASIN campaign as separate campaigns so that I can put more money on the ones that are more likely to convert. Okay. And all of that is in detail, a lot of detail, in the advertising challenge from last year, which can be signed up for on our Teachable site. Okay. So I have a product that is a kit that's kitted at a warehouse in Wisconsin. Recently, I've had customers say they're missing parts from the kits. The crew in Wisconsin says their work is perfect and error-free, and I trust them. How can I audit my account to check for data that would help solve this mystery? 2 months ago, I disabled the repackaging in Seller Central. Okay, so first, good on you for disabling repackaging. Really hate that feature. Basically, Amazon was trying to be helpful, as usual, trying to be helpful and not quite being as helpful as they could be, and figured that there's so many returns that come back from customers that would be perfectly good to sell if only the product package were repackaged. Isn't that so helpful? Except that that's not what you want, right? Customers think that it's used if they get a repackaged item. Sorry, getting a little dry. So definitely have that off. As far as the perfection that is claimed by the crew in Wisconsin, I personally don't trust people 100% ever. You don't know if there was a new employee, or perhaps one of the employees had a fight with their boyfriend, or perhaps, one of the employees had their car break down and they were stressed out and they just forgot something. Humans don't even have close to, I think what humans are, it's like 2 sigma accuracy rates, as opposed to what lean management is all about, which is reaching 6 sigma accuracy rates. Humans relying on humans. No one's doing it on purpose, but humans make mistakes, and they make a lot of mistakes. I think with even a really solid human workforce that's well-trained, you can expect between 98 and 99% accuracy. That's it. So 100% is never a thing. Like it's statistically not a thing. Just humans don't function that way. So that's the first thing I would say, is that I would be a little bit more pushy with the folks in Wisconsin to say, okay, but have you actually reviewed your processes, because this is consistently an issue and people are complaining. Then what you can do on the Amazon side is you can file what's called bin checks. So what you do is you go to help. So you go to help, contact us, and then FBA, and then do another issue. And then in the other issue, type in, I'm requesting a bin check on my product, and then you put in your ASIN, and Amazon will actually send a person out there and go check your bins and send you pictures. Okay, so then you can see. Now the problem is, if they look at something that was a previous batch, maybe it'll be complete. If they look at something that's current, maybe they won't. It's totally random because they're not doing 100% audit, right? They're just going and doing one single bin check. The other thing that you can do is you can actually do a few removals. So just remove 5 from your current inventory. And what it'll do is it'll randomly pull from somewhere and then send you 5. So that's also a good way to check it yourself, or you can do all 3. And that's completely reasonable too. But the easiest way to do it is just do a bin check. But I would definitely be careful about trusting another company. Even us, I don't trust that my employees did everything correctly the first time, because people have bad days. People have brain farts. Like it's a thing, people are people. So nobody's perfect. Kara asks, Amazon Europe, is the long-term ROI worth all the work and effort to get set up there? I believe it absolutely is, and that's based on my experience with Amazon Basics and with Pinzon. So the amount of effort it takes to go into Europe is so much worse than anywhere else, except maybe China. China's pretty bad too, if you actually want to sell in China. A lot of stuff made in China can't be sold in China. China's actually fairly strict, unless you pay somebody off, which obviously we can't do. So for Amazon Europe, when we first launched Amazon Basics products, we would do it globally. And things always showed up about 3 months later in Europe, because that's how much longer it took to get a product that would pass everything and get it into the stores. So it was always a little bit behind in Europe. Then when we were launching all of the Pinzon items to Europe, basically about half of the line didn't work. And so right now, I don't remember the exact number, but they're selling millions in Europe now. But when we first launched, it was really slow and kind of crappy. And we had to listen to the customers and come up with better ways to offer products in the European market. Sometimes the things that you're selling in the US just won't sell in Europe, and then it's not worth it. So you do have to be careful to make sure that anything that you're currently selling in the US even has a market in Europe, because it may not. When I lived in Europe, the 2 times that I was there, the first apartment that I had a 2-stove electric burner. It had a bathroom built into an old closet. It was very tiny. There was no living room. The tiny little space for dining. It was like enough space for 4 people in like a booth style format. And we had no stove. It was just a toaster oven. And then the space, I think there were like 2 cabinets. And then the refrigerator it's like one of those mini fridges that you'd have at like your desk at work, here. And very little space. I would go shopping pretty much every day or every other day because you just couldn't stock up like you do here. First of all, there's too many preservatives in the food here. And so things actually do last. Like you can do the Costco run. Can everyone still hear me? Okay, there it is. It went back. You can do the Costco run and keep it for 2 weeks. In Europe, it's like nothing is preserved. And so you've got to go get your bread almost every day. So it's a totally different kind of space culture as well as product culture. We also had a problem with our outdoor furniture being labeled as FSC certified on the website and not on the packaging. And we got a bunch of customer complaints. So you really have to think about the market and what the market wants. But as far as the actual size of the market, we launched in 2013 in Europe for Pinzon, and it's already selling millions. And it was a completely brand new brand. I mean, it's got Amazon behind it, and so they didn't have to worry about, advertising costs or anything like that. So that was helpful, but Amazon was pretty terrible at reordering and organizing themselves. So they had problems that a small seller would not. And they're now selling millions of products in the European marketplace. But keep in mind, we started in 2013, and I don't think they turned a profit until 2015. So if you're going to do that, you've got to have really strong cash flows on your US side to account for the effort to grow and to move in the European marketplace. The only exception I would say is we've got a client who just started out and launched in Australia, US, and the UK all at once. And the reason why we were totally okay with that and didn't advise him against that is because he already has distribution networks in those places offline, so offline retail. And so for that, there was no reason to worry about it. He already had product there. He already had the infrastructure in place. He just wasn't online yet. So in that case, go for it. But I say that Europe is huge. With the European Union, Brexit notwithstanding, they keep asking to stay. So we'll see what happens there. The European Union has more people in it than in the United States. So the actual size of the EU marketplace, I believe, is 350 million. It might be more now with some of the new accession. And Amazon just added Amazon Turkey, which very closely mirrors the regulations of the EU because they've been trying to join the EU for ages. So I think Europe is great, but you do have to be careful what you offer because, the first place that I lived in Europe was this tiny little apartment in the 9th district of Vienna, and it was lovely, very tiny. The second place I lived in was much more typical of house type structure. It had a yard. I never used the yard, but it had a yard because I was renting from the owners. And it had a big room. I had a captain's bed. That's something that does pretty well in Europe, and different kinds of duvets and bedding in Europe. So you have to be careful about that too. But they had a full-size fridge. They had a full-size kitchen. It was a typical house. And so depending on your demographics, you may have people who are still interested. If you send like the American size, American products there, it'll just be fewer than here because there's a lot more urban dwellers in Europe. Okay. Yeah, I'm a big Europe fan. I think it's easier to launch in Europe than it is in other places, but it really depends on your product and what you're going after. There are some folks who have gotten a lot more results going into Japan, but it depends on your product. Okay, I was shopping for a floor lamp on Amazon and came across a listing with reviews included in images, not the main one. Is it something worth doing for my listings? Could it be against TOS? You're not supposed to put any sort of text in the secondary images. So that's the stated policy. You're also not supposed to use the reviews because that's not your copyrighted content. It's produced by the customer and owned by Amazon. So technically speaking, you're not supposed to do that. Now, have I ever seen anyone taken down for it? No, I haven't. So technically speaking, it's a problem. But in terms of the reality of it, I have never seen it actually be a problem. So if you're willing to take that risk, the risk is fairly minimal. You just need to know that it is actually not permitted, but I literally have never seen anyone get in trouble for it. Okay. I know Amazon does not like our own website pricing to be lower than our Amazon listing, but what about sale pricing on our own website that is not on Amazon? Also, what if we do a buy one, get one on our website? So here is something that was really fun that I actually talked about in the Storefront Challenge this morning. One of the interesting kind of side effects of the current presidential candidate race and everyone talking about different things is that Elizabeth Warren put out this proposal to break up the big tech giants. So break up Facebook, Google, and Amazon. And basically had this focus on saying that Amazon has an unfair advantage because they can force sellers to sell at the lowest price, and they can figure out who's selling all their stuff and then compete with them using their own brands, which is all exactly true, which is, one of the things that all of us can kind of be annoyed about Amazon. And literally like a day, maybe 2 days after that plan was published, I don't remember if it was an interview or if it was just a published like press release kind of thing. Amazon said they were no longer requiring people to have price parity between Amazon and their website. So this is no longer an issue. So if you have been out of the loop, out of the news loop about what's happening, that particular kind of shot across the bow from a presidential candidate has actually had an effect on Amazon's policies, which is pretty cool. Amazon listens. That's something that has been pretty common throughout the story of Amazon, is that they're always paying attention to what customers think, and they saw the polls and how much people were kind of resenting the power that Amazon has, and immediately changed. So they do listen, and people do matter. Your voice, collective voice, does matter, make a difference. So if you want to have lower pricing on your website, or run a BOGO on your website, or stand up and dance on your website, it doesn't matter now. You can do whatever you want. Okay. Kara had a follow-up question. A second question. Okay. I finally received my trademark and submitted for brand registry on 3/21, completed verification on 3/25, and it has been processed now since 3/25. I have followed up by the case several times with no response. Do I just wait, or is there another way to reach out to them? They are swamped because they went and did something stupid. I am so annoyed at brand registry right now. So the challenge with brand registry is that they tried to fix things about a month ago to force all vendors into brand registry. To do this, they had to decouple brand registry from automatically moving into marketplace. Now it's something that is attached to Vendor Central or to Seller Central. But they completely screwed up what they did. It was not good. So we've been having problems for the past month with 4 different clients who we've filed multiple cases, contacted Amazon. I finally just reached out to the director of brand registry, who I used to work with, and said, hey, I don't think this is what you intended. Here's all of our problems. And got a phone call back and described all the problems to one of her team members. And he was like, oh, I thought that I'd just be calling you and telling you to add, a user to your account. Apparently we did break something. And I was like, yep, I didn't think this is on purpose because it's not working. And so they're working on it right now. We have sent them a few examples. If you have more examples of things, I'm happy to forward those on. If you give us the exact brand name, I can forward those on to them to take a look at and try to fix. But I know that they've gotten just a ton of inquiries because everything is broken. So I bet the brand registry support team is behind because everything's broken. I don't know why they didn't test it before they launched. But in any case, it's all completely broken. Yay, Amazon, good job. This is why I always try to be careful about ascribing any nefarious action to Amazon, because mostly it's just stupid. Mostly just somebody screwed up. It wasn't something on purpose. And there's been a couple of blog posts out like, Amazon's going to take everything down. I'm like, Amazon's got to figure out how to do that first. Maybe I have less faith from having actually had to fight these fights. All right, next question. I have an issue. I'm setting up a company to sell on Amazon, but the company is set up a bit awkwardly with several subsidiaries. Amazon has reached back out to verify information, the utility bill, and the business license. Unfortunately, this company's building is set up under holding company, as several of their subsidiaries operate out of the same office building. Likewise, they don't have a traditional business license, as is not required for their state for e-com based businesses. Can you provide any guidance? Okay, so first thing is any business that is operating in the US should have an EIN. So at the very least, you will have that, and you will have some sort of letter, I think it's CP 575, something like that, from the IRS that you can provide that shows that you have registered as a business in the United States and you're a real business, open for business, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first thing. Just because your state doesn't require that kind of paperwork doesn't mean that you don't have it. The other thing is your state does require taxes. I absolutely believe that that's the case, because the only states that don't do require business licenses. So then your state definitely requires taxes. So you will have registered at some point for the Department of Revenue or the equivalent in your state, and you probably have some sort of registration or license from them, even if you don't have a business license that's required. Now, as far as a subsidiary issue, Amazon doesn't care. What Amazon cares about, for the people who are reviewing this, they're all the lower level employees in India who are reviewing these kind of issues. They have a checklist. The checklist says that your utility bill must match the business that you signed up for on Amazon. Period. That's it. There's no exceptions to this. There's no requests for exceptions. There's no, I built this really interesting, awkward business structure, and therefore I need an exception. No exceptions. These are people just out of college. They're doing this manually. They don't know what that means. They need the utility bill to match the business. So the best way that you can do this, the easiest way, is to sign up for a cell phone. It's very cheap. So you just sign up for a cell phone in the business name, and now you've got a cell phone utility bill you can send to Amazon. No exceptions. Don't try to get out of it. Don't try to explain it. There's no point. Just sign up for a cell phone. It's much easier. Okay. So the other thing that you usually have to do, so the business license is just a verification. They need to verify you somehow. So usually the EIN letter will work. I think it's C575, something like that. And you can get that in fax or paper form from the IRS if you don't have your electronic letter. Isn't that great? I love that. You can fax them. So if you don't have that from your state, you can get that. The other thing is that you can usually get, even if you don't have business licenses, you can usually get a declaration that you're in business or something like that from a Department of Revenue, and they'll send you like a letter on the state letterhead that says these people have been paying their taxes. So you can generally get something from the state that has your business name and the state logo or something like that on it. They just need to verify that you're a real person, that you're not some sort of Chinese knockoff company. Amazon is aware of all the problems they've had with the Chinese counterfeits. They're aware of the fact that people have been buying accounts, of people faking to be other people. They've made it really difficult to sign up for new accounts now. You have to have your passport in there. They validate it. They check everything, because there have been so many cheaters. Everyone's had this experience, really, of hijackers coming in and taking over. And you're like, why isn't Amazon doing anything? Well, now they are, and that's this. So you can't have a, kind of tricksy business set up and hope that it'll work. You have to have something that's really straightforward. And it should be pretty straightforward to get a phone in the actual business's name. Okay. So another question. Lee said, I had an issue with brand registry and it took them 3 months to fix it. In fairness to them, they did stay in touch and did fix the issue. It just took a while. Yeah, they're really underfunded. It's kind of a small team. They do their best, though. All right, next thing was, do you have experience sourcing products from IndiaMart.com? Is it reliable? Any other similar India marketplace, or better yet, an India sourcing agent you might be able to recommend? Think in advance. India is tough. I have seen IndiaMart. There's nothing wrong with anything that's on there. The problem with India as a sourcing location has nothing to do with which website you use. That's the wrong question to ask, whether IndiaMart is reliable. Because you can have a reliable website, you can have a reliable sourcing agent and still get crappy product from your supplier. The reason being is because India is so manual about everything. There's not very much mechanization, depending on the category, of course, but nearly everything is handmade. And as with anything handmade with humans, there are errors. And so you've got to have a lot tighter of quality control in place in India than you do in other places. You have to inspect everything. You can never skip inspection in India, ever. Because the problem is you have, say, 100 sewers in a room, and 4 or 5 of them might be new. And so everything that they produce is going to be just a little bit less quality than the other ones, because it's just inconsistent, right? Not a lot of it's done through machine. A lot of it's literally done by like hand size sewing machines. So when you have a bigger factory or something like that, a lot of times they'll have specialty sewing machines that do specific things. They do them really well. And you like key it into the sewing machine and it automates the whole thing. Like you don't make buttonholes by hand, right? You draw the line on there, then you tell the machine, make a buttonhole, and it goes zzz, and then cuts it, right? Easy. Problem with India is that they're literally using like Singer sewing machines, Brother sewing machines, Singer sewing machines, etc., that are just regular sewing machines, and they're hand stitching buttonholes. But someone who has experience will do a really great buttonhole. Someone who doesn't will have a crappy buttonhole. So I would say that for India, the challenge is not so much finding a reliable website, because indiamart.com is fine. You'll find suppliers just fine that way. The problem is making sure that the product quality that you get from a manufacturer is the same as the sample, because they have their best people making samples, and they're hand making samples, and it's their master craftsmen who are making these samples. The most senior people make those. And a lot of times, I've seen this happen with a lot of different companies that do handmade stuff. They'll actually like hand make clay molds and then like make the product directly from there. It's amazing what some of these people can do. Then you get to the production and it's totally different. So that's what you really have to be careful of in India, not so much, whether you need to have a login or not. Now, as far as a sourcing agent, I don't even think that that's super important in India, because most of your businesses will have a salesperson who speaks English, not even a question. So that the language barrier isn't as bad as in China. But your time zone is the killer part. So there's a lot of folks who can help you in India, but you don't need it. Not the same way as like in China. I highly recommend having a sourcing agent, just because the culture is so different, everything's so different. You do have that challenge in India, but because India was a colony of Great Britain for so long, it functions a lot more like you would expect than China does, since we all kind of had the same colonial sort of background thing happening. The legal systems and the expectations are somewhat similar. Now I say somewhat because a lot of times people still do cut a lot of corners in India that they just wouldn't consider cutting here, or in Britain even. Okay. Have you participated in the Amazon Exclusives program? And if so, what has your experience been? Do you recommend it? Yes, we have had a client who was working on the Amazon Exclusives program, and I don't recommend it for most people. So Amazon Exclusives forces you into selling just on Amazon, your own website, or your own brick and mortar. And the challenge with that is, first, you can't do anything off of Amazon. You've got to grow with Amazon. Now, you can quit at any time. You're not forced into a long-term contract with them. But it takes an extra 5% off the top, and they don't give you enough help for it. So for our client programs, if we manage a client, and let me know if you can't hear me clearly, because it's kind of doing a little warning thing. With our clients, we actually do 5% as well, but we do nearly everything for them. We actually create listings, we create video, we create image content, we write the listings, we post everything, we make all of your stuff. They take 5%, and what they give you is some special ad placement and occasional newsletters. That's it. So for most people, it's not very useful. If you don't have anything else going on yet, then it's just one other thing that you can do if you've got the margin. But most people, it doesn't make sense for them. There's a new program called Amazon Brand Incubator that we're trying with a client, and it may be of interest. We're just trying to get as much movement as possible for them, and they have a huge margin on their products, so it's worth it for them. Okay. So just received a message about participating in the Amazon Transparency Program. Is it any good? Apparently it helps you and protects your brand, but it's only free for 6 months. Is this recommended? Okay, so Transparency is a new brand program meant to combat counterfeiters. I actually am not a huge fan, and the reason being is because to make it work, you have to put sticker labels on pretty much everything you sell, whether on Amazon or off Amazon, because that's how they can validate if it's a real product. Is if someone bought it on, like Walmart or something like that, then it should have a sticker. Now, there's a lot of people who are doing it who aren't doing that, but that's the whole point of the program, is to make sure that you have items that are not counterfeit going in. So even authorized sellers, if you don't put stickers on everything, even your authorized sellers who are on Amazon can be dinged for selling counterfeit if the transparency sticker isn't on there. So it can cause you some supply chain headaches. The second thing is that apparently, and we haven't worked on this before, but apparently the machinery to print the sticker is somewhat expensive. So a little bit more than just, the little barcode label, apparently. So as far as the efficacy of it, it's still too early to really tell, in my opinion. Some people are big proponents of it. but I haven't seen any good evidence that it's more significant than the notice and takedown process. And the good thing about that is that with Project Zero, that can be fully automated by the brands. So it may not even be worth it to do transparency when you can just take down the counterfeiters anyway. And Mike says, from my understanding, transparency only works for FBA inventory. If others use FBM, transparency won't help you. Yes, that's exactly correct. Transparency does not help you with FBM. It's only for items that Amazon actually checks in. And so even still, the notice and takedown process is going to be more effective for you. Okay, so this is the last question of today. If you have a question and you haven't posted, then you need to post it now. The question is, what's the difference between a storefront and a homepage? So on Amazon, there are only storefronts. So storefronts are, it's kind of like there's two things called storefronts. It's a little bit confusing. There is a seller storefront, which is when you click on your seller name and you see all the stuff that you're selling as a seller. Then you have what's called a brand storefront, and that's when you click on the brand name and you see everything that the brand offers. Those are two different kinds of storefronts. There's nothing that's actually called a homepage on Amazon, but there are two different storefronts. So your seller storefront and your brand storefront. Always double check when people say, go look at my storefront, or I have a storefront, because sometimes they may be talking about their seller storefront, not their brand storefront. And a storefront on the brand side, you can do a whole build out just like a regular website. On the seller storefront, it's a default format that just has a list of all your stuff and your feedback and your returns policies and stuff like that. Okay, I think that is it for today. I don't see any other questions that jumped in. All right, thanks everyone for joining me this morning, and we will talk again next Wednesday. All right, talk to you later. Bye.